The galaxy is endless, and yet, to live within it is to feel only the walls of a cage. The stars glitter, but their light is no promise of salvation, only a reminder of distance, of isolation, of a universe uncaring. The Imperium of Man calls this the Age of the Imperium, a million worlds crushed under the heel of bureaucracy, faith, and fire. They say it is glorious. They say it is divine. In truth, it is an empire rotting on its throne, gnawed by vermin from without and within. We know what stalks the void, the green tide of the orcs, forever hungry for battle. The swarms of the Tyranids, devouring everything in their path. The ancient, soulless Necrons, cold as tombstone iron. And of course, the dark gods of the warp, whose whispers infest every shadow. But what if I told you that something else came? Something not of this galaxy, not of this age. A storm unlike any other brood in the warp, a storm thick with rage. Not the planned malice of Khorne, nor the seductive cruelty of Slaanesh, no. This was raw, unshaped fury, a tempest of destruction so pure that even demons hesitated at its edge. And inside that storm, adrift upon a shattered vessel, there was a man. No, not a man. Something more. Something born not of the Emperor, nor of chaos, nor of Xeno's science. A creature whose heartbeat was thunder, whose blood ran molten with power. His name? Forgotten by this galaxy? But another universe called him Broly, and here, in the 41st millennium, he would become something else entirely. The arrival, picture it. The black void is split apart by claws of emerald lightning. A warp storm stretches across a forgotten sector of the segmentum obscurus, snarling at the very fabric of reality. Astropath choirs screamed themselves to madness as they beheld it. Ships vanished. Worlds went dark. In the center of that storm, tumbling endlessly, drifted a ruin of metal. Not an Imperial frigate, nor a Xenos craft. A pod, shattered, battered, leaking life. Inside, chained by nothing but unconsciousness, floated a giant. Muscles like corded steel, skin pale, scarred, burned by stars not of this galaxy. His armor was in tatters, scraps of alien metal clinging to his frame. His eyes fluttered, half open, but within them glowed a sickly rising green. He should have died. Any man would have. But this was not a man. The warp bent around him. The furies of the immaterium clawed at his soul, but recoiled, shrieking. For here was a presence not aligned with them, not worshipping, not bargaining, not supplicating. Pure, blind rage. They fed on it, yes, but they also feared it. Like wild beasts circling a greater predator. The storm raged for decades. Entire fleets sent to chart its edges were lost. Imperial commanders declared the sector forbidden, cursed, a black mark in the star maps. End them. It ended, just like that. The storm evaporated, leaving silence and ruin. Out of the void drifted a single form, a body, bare, scarred, steaming with an aura no augur could classify. A derelict mining moon pulled it into orbit. The workers there, half-starved serfs, little more than slaves, found it among the wreckage. They thought it was a corpse, until its eyes opened, and the green light poured out. The first scream those who survived spoke of it in whispers, in prisons, in confessions, before their executions. They said he rose like a titan. Chains could not hold him. Lesvia melted against his skin. He screamed, and the sound shook the moon's caverns apart. They watched as his body glowed with emerald fire, a halo of crackling rage. He did not speak their tongue. He did not know their gods. He only knew hunger, fury, survival. And in that first scream, 1,000 souls perished, crushed beneath rock and fire. The Imperium never learned the full truth. The reports were buried, lost in the endless tide of bureaucracy. Mining Moon lost to seismic instability. That was all the administratum recorded. But we know better. We know something woke that day, and that was only the beginning. The Imperium tells us that nothing new comes into the galaxy. The galaxy is already full of hunger, full of war, full of ruin. There is no place for strangers. But the galaxy is a liar, for in the ashes of that dead mining moon, something stirred. The survivor the serfs who crawled from the rubble saw him first. He did not look like a man. His body was taller, broader, carved like a weapon of flesh. His hair, dark and matted, fell wild around his scarred face. His eyes burned with that unnatural green glow, not the gold of a saint, not the red of a demon. Something else. He staggered, barefoot, across broken stone, breathing like a beast, low and ragged. The survivors whispered prayers to the Emperor. Some fell to their knees, thinking a Primarch had returned. Others fled, fearing a demon of chaos. Both were wrong. Broly understood nothing of their words. His mind was a fog of hunger and memory. In fragments, he recalled battles fought in another cosmos. A father's hand raised in cruelty, voices calling him monster, weapon, curse. He remembered pain, and so he recognized it easily in the hollow faces around him. The serfs offered him food, scraps of corpse-starch rations. He devoured them raw, his hands shaking with violence he did not yet unleash. He had no need for faith. He had no need for reason. He had only need, and need is what shaped his story. The first kill happened quickly. Too quickly an overseer of the mines arrived with his guards. The moon had fallen silent. The overseer demanded answers. What he found instead was Broly. They fired their lasguns without hesitation. The green light erupted again. Bolts of energy, beams of light, melted against his chest. He staggered back, not from pain, but from rage. The sound of his scream rolled through the caverns like thunder, like the tearing of mountains. And then the killing began. One sweep of his arm shattered bone and armor alike. Men were torn in half by strength no living creature should possess. The overseer begged the Emperor for salvation before his skull was crushed in Broly's fist. The survivors say the cavern itself seemed to pulse with his fury. Green lightning crackled against stone, melting metal to slag. It was not a battle. It was a storm, unleashed through flesh. When it ended, nothing remained of the guards, only ash. The serfs prostrated themselves before him. Some called him an angel. Others dared to whisper the word God. Broly understood none of it. He only knew one thing. He was alive, and those who tried to chain him would die. The spreading fear rumors move faster than light. Even in the labyrinth of imperial bureaucracy, fear finds its way. The tale of the Green Titan drifted across void ship holds, was smuggled in whispered confessions, and prayed against in shrines. A story was told of a giant who had risen from a dead moon, a man who could not die. Some said he was a son of the Emperor, forgotten, abandoned. Others swore he was a chaos-born abomination. The more superstitious whispered that he was neither, but something worse. A punishment cast from beyond the stars. The Inquisition took interest, of course. They always do. But interest in the Imperium is not swift. It is slow, like poison. By the time their eyes turned toward that cursed moon, Broly was gone. A beast wanders the galaxy is vast. Worlds are scattered like grains of sand, each one bleeding beneath the yoke of the Imperium. And across those wastes walked Broly. He wandered ship graveyards, feeding on whatever he could find. He broke open bulkheads with his fists, feasting on nutrient paste, on half-rotten meat, on anything that filled his stomach. On one forgotten, agri world, he tore through fields of Grok's beasts, eating them raw, his body steaming with power as though the act of survival itself fueled his strength. And wherever he went, people died. Not always because he hunted them, sometimes only because they were near. His power was unstable, seeping from him in violent waves. A cry of rage would shatter walls. A careless blow would snap a man in half. the galaxy began to name him in earnest. Not angel, not demon, but monster. Myths in the making. It is strange how myths are born. One story tells of a pilgrim barge that found itself adrift after a warp translation error. The engines failed, food dwindled, faith ran thin. They saw him walking among the void. No ship, no air, no protection. Just a man, glowing with emerald fire, striding across the stars, as if the void itself bowed beneath him. The barge survivors swore that their prayers were answered. They believed he was a living saint sent to test them. When the Inquisition finally questioned them, all they could say was, his eyes were not mercy, they were hunger. Another tale speaks of a garrison outpost on the edge of the maelstrom. The soldiers there claimed a giant descended from the sky, tearing apart raiders with his bare hands. They tried to hail him. They tried to thank him. But when they approached, he turned on them with a roar that cracked their vox channels into static. The outpost was found months later. Nothing left but shattered walls and green scorch marks burned into the stone. Myth. Truth, in this galaxy, they are the same. Both are dangerous, and through it all, Broly did not know who he was here. He did not know the Emperor. He did not know chaos. He only knew hunger, rage, survival. But the galaxy knew him, and it was afraid. The Imperium is vast, and in that vastness lies a truth. Most tragedies vanish without record. 1 billion lives can burn on a forgotten world, and the galaxy will not even blink. But some tragedies echo. Some burn so brightly that even the blind cannot ignore them. The Green Titan was one such tragedy. The first regiment began on the dust world of Goras, IVA planet of ashwists and orpits, populated by miners and soldiers who knew only toil. Its guard garrison numbered 10,000 men, enough, they thought, to hold against orc raids or cult uprisings. When the Titan came, he did not arrive as an army. He did not arrive as a fleet. He came alone. The Auspexes picked him up first, a figure falling through atmosphere, wrapped in green fire. At first they thought it a drop pod, some lost Astartes warrior. Then he landed, and the ground itself screamed. They surrounded him with tanks, lines of men, artillery positions. Orders were barked, bolters thundered. The sky lit with LA's fire. It did not matter. He moved like lightning, wrapped in muscle. Every step shattered tanks like toys. Every swing of his arm tore men apart by the dozen. Rockets exploded against him, but only drove his fury higher. He roared, and the sound ruptured eardrums, burst blood vessels, shattered fortifications. By the end, the regiment no longer existed. 10,000 men, ash on the wind. Goras the Fourth burned, its hive cities turned to rubble. The Administratum labeled it Xeno's incursion and sealed the records. But survivors whispered the truth. They had seen a giant wreathed in emerald, and nothing they had fired even slowed him. The first regiment was gone, but it would not be the last. The warp response rage is never silent in the 41st millennium, where Broly walked. The warp screamed. Storms flared in his wake, not controlled, not summoned, but born of the sheer violence that poured from his soul. Astropaths near him clawed their eyes out, muttering about a green sun burning through the immaterium, and worse. The storms drew attention. Demons began to appear, not because Broly called them, but because his presence tore the veil thin. Bloodletters clawed through reality, shrieking praises to Korn, only to be obliterated in seconds by his fists. Pleasure fiends of Slanesh swarmed him, only to dissolve in emerald fire. But the more he fought, the worse it became. His rage fueled the warp, and the warp vomited forth more horrors. He became both predator and beacon, a living battle that never ceased. The Imperium feared him, chaos hungered for him, and neither could control him. The pilgrimage massacre there is a story, perhaps true, perhaps embellished. In this galaxy, what is the difference? A fleet of pilgrims crossed the void, their ships laden with statues, relics, and hymns. They sang praises to the Emperor, believing themselves blessed. Then their paths crossed his. They say he appeared in the void itself, striding between vessels as if the vacuum were solid ground. The fleet panicked. Some captains opened fire. Some prayed louder. None survived. When a rescue ship arrived months later, it found only wreckage, hulks torn apart, hulls punched through by fists stronger than steel. And among the drifting corpses, some swore the bodies still glowed faintly green, as if his wrath had burned into their bones. The ecclesiarchy suppressed the tale, of course, but the whispers spread faster than fire. Even the faithful were not safe. Escalation after Gora's 4, after the pilgrim fleet, after the storms, Broly could no longer be dismissed as rumor. Entire sectors trembled. Every emerald aurora in the sky was seen as his coming. Worlds fortified themselves. Garrisons prayed louder. Commissars executed quicker. And yet, whenever armies rose to face him, they broke. The orcs called him Da, Green God. They laughed. They cheered. They charged him in endless waves and were torn apart like grass before a hurricane. Even they, the children of endless war, began to fear his roar. Chaos warbands sought him out, hoping to recruit or corrupt him. They found only death. His fury shredded demons, broke champions, even toppled the corrupted engines of war. But the dark gods do not relent. They whispered, they baited, they spread his image in their cults as both idol and enemy. The Imperium, desperate, considered him a classist extremist threat, not to be fought openly, but to be avoided, redirected, quarantined. But how do you quarantine a storm? The Green Titan was no longer a man. He was a calamity, a world's last night. Let me end this part with one world's memory. Tarsis, Ultra, a minor world, known only for its frozen oceans and manufactorums. One night, the skies tore open. A green star fell. The next morning, the manufactorums were rubble. The oceans boiled, millions dead, and only a single survivor found. A little girl, blind, clutching at the corpse of her mother. When asked what happened, she only said, "The star was angry," and then she died. So the horrors escalated. Each event worse than the last. Each scream louder. Each death toll greater. And through it all, the Titan did not stop. Because how can you stop something that does not seek conquest, or wealth, or worship? How do you fight something that only knows rage? You cannot. You can only endure until he finds you. Asterisk in the Imperium of Man. Weapons are more than steel and fire. They are prayers made physical, faith hammered into form, desperation given edge. When the Green Titan spread across the stars like a plague, people turned to arms, not only for war, but for hope. The Militarums, Arsenal the Astra Militarum, the hammer of the Emperor, uncountable in number, infinite in sacrifice. They brought everything against him. Lasguns, billion-fold beams of light, chattering in volleys until the air itself burned. Against him, they were gnats against lemon rust tanks, great armored beasts, their cannons roaring like gods of old. He tore their turrets free with his bare hands, smashed them into the dirt like toys. Artillery barrages, entire kilometers of earth scoured by shells. And yet when the smoke cleared, he stood untouched, the craters glowing green with his fury. Baneblades, the kings of armored war, city killers, symbols of imperial dominance. He ripped through their hulls with a single punch, each detonation a funeral pyre for hundreds of crew. Every weapon failed, not once, not occasionally, always, and failure bred madness. Commissars executed soldiers, not for retreating, but for screaming when they saw him coming. Regiments deserted, choosing exile in the void over certain annihilation. Some even mutinied, claiming no man could serve a throne that abandoned them to a monster no weapon could touch. The hammer of the Imperium struck, again and again, and shattered against the anvil of his body. The Astartes' response to Space Marines, demigods of war, could not ignore him. Several chapters crossed his path, some hunting him, some stumbling into his wrath. The Ultramarines sent a strike force, led by a captain sworn to Guilliman himself. He fought bravely, blade and bolter in hand. He died screaming as Broly's fist crushed his armor like foil. The survivors fled, their shame recorded only in censored archives. The Space Wolves thought him a worthy foe, a beast to be hunted, a saga to be sung. They charged with frost blades and howling fury. Broly broke them like twigs, their saga ending in blood and silence. Even the Grey Knights, those most holy of warriors, brushed against his storms. They attempted wards, sigils, psychic binds, only to have their sorcery shattered by the raw, unthinking storm of his power. One Justicar, before his death, whispered that the Titan was not a man, nor a mutant, but a force of unchained nature, something the Emperor himself might not master. The Emperor's angels found no glory here, only ruin. Symbols of resistance weapons failed, so the people turned to symbols. In Hive City's shrines were raised not to worship him, but to ward against him. Candles burned, bones of saints displayed, Aquilas painted in ash and blood upon every doorway. Some wore emerald charms, believing like to repel like, they thought, shards of green glass, worn on cords about the neck, might trick him, turn his gaze aside. Others painted themselves in ashes, whispering that if they looked like corpses, the Titan would pass them by. In one world, an entire hive stopped speaking aloud. They believed the Titan hunted sound, that silence would save them. For 10 years they lived in near silence. It did not matter. When he came, their walls fell like all the rest. The cult symbols always breed cults. Some said he was the Emperor's wrath, incarnate in flesh. They painted murals of a green-cloaked angel, fists blazing with holy fire. They marched into war, crying his name as though he were salvation. They were wrong. Others saw him as a god beyond gods, not of chaos, not of man, but a pure god of destruction. They sacrificed in his name, spilling blood into emerald-colored fires. Sometimes, they claimed, he came to them, not to bless, not to listen, but to kill. Still, they called that blessing. And then there were those who worshipped through imitation. They screamed, they raged, they destroyed their own hives in his honor. They claimed the more destruction they wrought, the closer they were to his power. Their worlds drowned in madness, long before he ever set foot upon them. The Titan never noticed these cults, but their madness spread, and so even worlds he never touched fell in his shadow. Tools of desperation, the Mechanicus tried as well. Archmagi constructed weapons that had never before seen battle. Macro cannons the size of cathedrals, firing shells bigger than men. Plasma annihilators pulled from Titan forges, burning stars bound into iron. Neural disruptors, meant to collapse the minds of psychers in an instant. None of it worked. In the Imperium of Man, there is no such thing as peace. There is only work, endless, thankless work. The weight of survival. I will tell you how life truly feels, not from the mouths of generals or saints, but from the lips of those who live in the dirt. We woke every morning to the sound of klaxons, not bells, not music, klaxons, the shriek of metal grinding through lungs. That was our dawn. We crawled from bunks, stacked like coffins, the stink of sweat and rot filling every breath. We ate nothing more than a rationed brick. Tasteless, gray. It stuck in the throat, but it was food. Better than nothing. Better than the smell of the one who sat across from you, knowing his fingers raw because hunger made him dream of meat. Work came next. Work always came next. Swinging pickaxes in mineral shafts, repairing hulls of ships too rusted to fly, dragging corpses to the incinerators. We did what we were told, because those who did not disappeared. Some said they were taken for questioning. Some said they were simply executed. We learned not to ask. That was daily life, a cycle of hunger, labor, prayer, and fear. Whispers of the Green Titan, but then came the whispers. You must understand, in a galaxy where every day is a struggle, stories are all we have. Stories of saints, of miracles, of punishments. And soon, one story rose above all others. The story of the Green Titan. Some said he was an angel of the Emperor, come to punish the corrupt. They claimed that entire garrisons vanished under his wrath because their commanders had grown fat and faithless. To them, his destruction was proof of purity, a divine cleansing flame. Others whispered darker things. They said he was a weapon forged by the ruinous powers, a beast born in the warp itself, sent to tear apart humanity's fragile empire. These men and women crossed themselves and spat 3 times when his name was mentioned, as if spitting out poison. And then there were those who believed something worse, that he was neither angel nor demon, but something wholly alien, a predator from beyond the stars, an omen that the Emperor's light was fading. Every campfire, every mess hall, every barracks, his name grew. Green Titan, Star Giant, the beast of rage. We never knew the truth, but truth hardly mattered. Fear is as real as fact. Rituals of fear, you ask, what we did about these stories. We made rituals. Humanity always makes rituals when it is afraid. On one hive world, serfs began smearing green ash on their faces to ward off his gaze, as if mocking his aura would make him pass them by. In another, soldiers painted their armor with emerald streaks, believing it would hide them from his wrath. The commissars executed hundreds for heresy, but the rituals continued in secret. Fear cannot be shot. In manufactorums, mothers told their children, work hard, or the Green Titan will come for you. In the void ships of the segmentum astropaths flinched when emerald lightning flashed in their minds, claiming it was his roar echoing through the warp dot. Everyday life became a balancing act between faith in the Emperor and fear of the giant who defied him. The human costs: we were not warriors. We were not saints. We were flesh, brittle, and weak, and yet the galaxy demanded that we believe that our suffering had meaning. But when whispers of the Green Titan spread, that meaning cracked. If the Emperor truly protected us, why would he allow such a beast to roam free? If the Inquisition truly knew all, why did they not strike him down? Some people broke beneath the doubt. They threw themselves into the work with mindless zeal, flogging their own flesh to prove loyalty. Others turned bitter, muttering that the Imperium was a lie, and that perhaps the Titan was right to tear it down. Those men rarely lived long. Paranoia is a bloodhound in the Imperium. Betrayal is its leash. Even those who tried to stay silent could not escape. When you feel that green glow in your dreams, when you hear the echo of a scream that rattles stone and soul, how can you believe in safety? We endured. We always endure, but endurance is not life. It is waiting for the axe to fall. A glimpse of the monster. I tell you this, because I was there. Yes, I saw him. Just once. It was enough. We were herded into the cargo holds of a derelict transport. The overseers said we would be moved to another world, another mine. We didn't believe them. We expected to die in the dark. But then the ship shook. Not like turbulence, not like fire. It shook as if the void itself was screaming. Walls buckled, men cried, and then we saw him. Through the shattered hull, across the black, walked a giant cloaked in emerald fire. Not a suit, not a machine. Flesh, living flesh. He did not look at us. He did not need to. His presence was enough. It felt like standing before a furnace, a hurricane, a god. My bones still ache from that sight. The ship cracked open like a tin cup crushed in his fist. And then we were falling into silence, into void, into nothing. I lived, somehow. I should not have, but I did, and I will never forget the sight of him. So this was our life in the Imperium. Hunger, fear, work, prayer, but beneath it all, now, there was something new. A green shadow, walking the stars. And whether angel or demon, whether punishment or omen, we knew one thing: he was not finished with us yet. Asterisk, in the Imperium of man, fear is currency. It buys obedience. It purchases silence. It builds thrones higher than mountains. And when new fears arise, the rulers of the Imperium do not erase them. They chain them, twist them, and turn them into weapons. So it was with the Green Titan. The ecclesiarchy priests were the first to act. They always are. In cathedral hives, across 1,000 worlds, sermons began to change. At first, they denied him. There is no Green Titan, they said. Only liars and heretics spread such tales. But denial never lasts. Stories thrive in silence, so they shifted. They declared him a test. The Emperor, in his infinite wisdom, had unleashed this beast as trial by fire. If you faltered, if you doubted, if you broke, then you were unworthy of his light. Only the pure would be spared when the Titan roared. You see the genius? By turning Broly into a tool of faith, they fed their flock's fear back into obedience. Mothers whipped their children to ensure prayers were loud enough to shield them from the beast. Men flogged themselves bloody in penance for sins they had never committed. Faith became pain, and pain became proof. The ecclesiarchy did not fight him. They welcomed him, not in truth, but in myth. For nothing binds tighter than fear. Baptized as divine will, the commissariat took a simpler approach. They turned Broly into a cautionary tale. A monster whispered into soldiers' ears, "Hesitate in battle, and you will face worse than the Xenos. You will face the Titan." When regiments faltered, commissars barked his name. When deserters fled, firing squads invoked him. Even the faintest emerald glimmer in the sky became a rallying cry, or an excuse for execution. One report survives from the 143rd Ventrilian Dragoons, a squad that refused to charge into orc lines. The commissar did not shoot them. Instead, he raised his bolt pistol and declared, "Better to die to greenskins than to the Green Titan, who stalks cowards." Terrified of the myth, the squad charged. Not one returned. The commissar was commended. Thus, Broly's legend became a lash in the commissar's hands, flaying men into obedience. The Inquisition and, then, the Inquisition. Their silence was longer. But silence never means ignorance. Cells of the Ordo Malleus and Ordo Hereticus began collecting stories. Survivors were interrogated and executed. Entire villages burned, not because they had seen Broly, but because they dared to speak of him. To the Inquisition, knowledge itself is a contagion. Yet, even as they purged, they could not ignore him. Reports of shattered garrisons, of ships ripped apart without weapon signatures, of astropaths driven mad by emerald visions, these were no coincidence. But here lay the problem: he did not fit. He bore no mark of chaos, no sigil, no mutation, no allegiance. The warp recoiled from him as much as it feasted on his rage. To the Inquisition, this was not heresy. This was anomaly. An anomaly is more dangerous than heresy, because it cannot be explained. So they named him Subject Gamerold. They classified him not as demon, but as phenomena, and in their cold, clinical language, they buried what they truly feared, that the Titan was beyond even their reach. The tools of controlling, so the Imperium's rulers adapted. The ecclesiarchy made him a saint's shadow. The commissars made him a whip. The Inquisition made him a secret. This is how power works in the Imperium. Not with truth, not with justice, but with stories twisted until men no longer know what is real. I watched as men were executed simply for refusing to kneel at sermons about him. I saw a child beaten half dead for crying when a priest painted emerald streaks on her cheeks. I heard commissars laugh as they told green recruits, better to pray for the Emperor's mercy than to meet his beast. And through it all, Broly knew nothing of these lies. He did not ask to be a symbol. He did not ask to be a weapon of faith. He wandered, he raged, he destroyed, and the Imperium, in its hunger for control, built an empire of fear around him. The bitter irony, it is almost funny. If you can laugh at misery, the Imperium feared him. The Imperium used him, and in using him, they made him stronger, because every sermon, every whisper, every fearful prayer gave weight to his name. In the Imperium, thought is power, belief is fuel, fear is fire. And though Broly was no demon, though he bent no knee to chaos, the warp itself began to echo his existence. He was not only real in flesh, he was real in the minds of trillions. And that is the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. In the Imperium, survival is not life. It is obedience. It is silence. But when the Green Titan stalked the stars, even obedience was not enough. And that is when betrayal began to bloom like rot beneath the skin. The fracturing of communities. At first, we clung together. We huddled in churches, sang litanies to drown out the thunder of destruction. We believed that unity would save us, that if we prayed as one voice, the Emperor would shield us. But unity dies quickly when the walls shake. Neighbors accused neighbors of cowardice. Families split apart as some fled into the under. Others demanded to stay and die faithful. Markets closed, not from decree, but from fear. No one wished to share food when the end might come at any hour. And then came the betrayals. Collaboration. There are always those who believe that survival can be bargained on world after world. Some whispered that perhaps the Titan could be placated, that if they offered him tribute, perhaps he would spare their cities. And so, they tried. Some offered prisoners in chains. Others left out food, relics, even their own children, on altars of stone. None of it worked. Broly never bargained. He simply destroyed. But those collaborators were never punished by him. It was the Imperium that punished them. The Ecclesiarchy burned them alive as heretics. Commissars lined them against walls and shot them in the back of the head. Sometimes, whole towns were purged. Not for failing to resist him, but for daring to imagine submission. Desertions and mutinies. The guard is endless. Its ranks are drawn from billions. But even the endless can break. Regiments deserted en masse. Some hijacked troop transports and fled into the void, carving out pirate kingdoms and forgotten sectors. Others fell upon their officers, murdering commissars in the dark, taking their chances in the warp rather than facing the Green Titan on a battlefield. One regiment of Cadian veterans hardened against every horror the Eye of Terror had ever spat forth, simply laid down their weapons when they saw him coming. They turned their lasguns against their own commanders, executed them, and then sat waiting, silent, as Broly's shadow fell across them. They died kneeling, too broken to fight, too terrified to run. The cults of betrayal, if cults of worship, rose in his wake. So too did cults of betrayal. Some sought out chaos, praying to the ruinous powers for strength to defeat the Titan. They sold their souls for claws, horns, warp sorcery, only to discover even the gods of the warp were silent before him. Others betrayed not to chaos, but to alien masters. Tau envoys whispered promises of unity, technology, safety. Desperate governors listened. A few swore allegiance to the greater good, believing that together they might withstand the storm. They were wrong. Broly destroyed Tau and human alike, their banners burning together in the rubble. Even Eldar warlocks, prideful beyond measure, whispered bargains with desperate humans, knowledge for obedience, visions for blood. Those alliances lasted minutes. The Titan cared nothing for the lines drawn between species. Resistance in the shadows, not all was betrayal. Some resisted, quietly, desperately. There were mothers who hid children in the deepest caverns, teaching them silence, teaching them to never cry out when the earth shook. There were priests who lied, telling their flock that salvation was near, if only to keep them calm as the end came. Some guardsmen did fight, knowing it was hopeless, but fighting anyway. One such legend comes from Hive Melchior, where a single squad held a cathedral for 3 hours against the Titan. Their story is told in whispers. Their bones built into reliquaries. Did they delay him? No. Did they matter? To us, they did. For those 3 hours, they proved that even gods can be defied, even if not defeated. The poison of mistrust, the worst betrayal, was not to chaos, nor to aliens, nor even to false gods. The worst betrayal was of each other. A brother who killed his brother for a place on a shuttle. A governor who poisoned his advisors, so he alone could beg for imperial reinforcements. An inquisitor who abandoned 3 hives to their doom, so his own fortress might be fortified. Each betrayal left wounds deeper than the Titan's fists, and in time, betrayal became expected. We trusted no one. We prayed not for salvation, but only that death would come quickly. The cliffhanger, and yet, even in betrayal, even in resistance, even in despair, something darker still awaited us. Because where betrayal thrives, corruption follows, and where corruption blooms, chaos waits with open arms. And when the warp touched the Green Titan, the galaxy learned what true horror meant. Asterisk, the warp is not a place. It is a hunger, a storm of thought, dream, and nightmare. Every emotion, every whisper of rage, or lust, or despair, is amplified there into storms of living madness. And so, when the Green Titan raged across the galaxy, it was not only flesh and stone that he broke, it was the veil itself. The warp reacts when he fought. The air trembled, not just in real space, but in the warp. His fury was not merely physical, it bled into the immaterium like dye into water. Psychers screamed without knowing why. Their skulls cracked, their eyes bled. Some spoke in voices not their own, babbling of green suns and endless fists, pounding through eternity. Astropaths went blind in unison across entire sectors, their connection to the warp scalded by his presence. Choirs fell silent, their throats burned to ash, as if the immaterium itself recoiled. And demons did not rejoice. They fled. Demons of Corneo would think the blood god would welcome him. Broly's wrath was a symphony of violence, a hymn to slaughter. And indeed, warbands of Khorne did hurl themselves at him, hoping to prove worthy, to drink his fury, to feed the rivers of blood. But his rage was not worship. It was not sacrifice. It was not for Khorne. And so, when he fought them, their ichor steamed against his fists. He ripped bloodletters apart by the thousands, their screams silenced not in triumph, but in erasure. Even greater demons, bloodthirsters, those titanic avatars of slaughter, were broken beneath him. One was hurled back into the warp with such force that its echo is said to still ring across the brass citadel, a humiliation Khorne has never forgiven. Some whisper that the blood god himself turned his gaze away, not in fear, but in fury. For Broly was not a servant, not a champion, not even prey. He was competition. Demons of Dazinkith, changer of ways, master of sorcery, reveled in manipulation. In endless plans within plans, his demons tried to twist the Titan with illusions, to weave his fury into their designs. But how do you manipulate a storm? Dazinchin hosts cast spells like suns, wrote runes upon reality itself. Broly tore through them without noticing. Their schemes unraveled before they began. They called him the anomaly, a force outside prophecy, a variable the architect of fate could not calculate. To Tzench, he was not just dangerous, he was an insult. Demons of Nergoth, plague god, whispered that all things rot, All storms end, all rage burns out. He sent his children to smother Broly in decay. But rot needs time. Disease requires patience. Broly gave them none. He burned with such raw energy that plague itself turned to ash upon him. Nurglings popped like overripe fruit. Great unclean ones collapsed into steaming filth beneath his fists. Nurgle laughed still. Of course he laughs at everything, but even his chuckle was nervous. For Broly was proof that some things do not rot, they erupt. Demons of Slaanesh Dark Prince thrives on sensation, pain, ecstasy, the excess of every feeling. 2. Slaanesh Broly was intoxicating. His rage was so pure, so absolute, that it became a kind of pleasure even demons could barely endure. They swarmed to him, desperate to drink his fury like wine. They died screaming, torn apart in waves, and yet, some whisper, a shard of his presence remains in the palaces of Slaanesh, not as a captive, but as a wound, a reminder that not all excess can be consumed. Some excess consumes you. The warp twists, mortals, of course, suffered worst of all. Wherever Broly fought, warp storms followed. Planets were cut off from light and aid. Time shattered, days became minutes, years became seconds. In some places, people lived entire lives in the shadow of his passing, only for their bones to crumble the instant he departed. Psychers mutated uncontrollably. Some grew multiple mouths, all screaming his name. Others became bombs of flesh, detonating in emerald fire the moment he entered orbit. Even non-psychers felt it. Dreams bled. Sanity broke. Whole worlds went mad, painting themselves in green pigments, carving fists into their flesh, screaming until their throats split open. The Titan did not corrupt them. He did not intend it. His mere presence was enough. The darkest revelation here lies the cruelest truth. Even chaos could not control him. The ruinous powers are eternal. They feed on mortal emotion, shaping and twisting it into endless war. But Broly was no pawn. His fury was not a gift to them. It was his own. And so, for the first time, the gods of chaos recoiled. They whispered among themselves, each suspecting the others, each afraid to admit the same truth, that there walked a being who was not prey, nor pawn, nor servant, but something they could not own. And if chaos itself cannot own you, then the galaxy truly has no defense. The Imperium is a graveyard of stories. Most are forgotten, but some remain, whispered in the dark, told in half-truths and fragments, recorded by scribes who will never admit they wrote them. And when it comes to the Green Titan, there are stories, always stories. The martyr of Hive Vedra, when the Titan descended. There was a preacher, nameless, faceless in the records. He stood before his flock in the cathedral as the walls shook. And he did not run. He told them, "If the Emperor will not shield us, then I will." He stood in the doorway, rosarius in hand, reciting the creed. Broly did not hear him. Broly did not stop. The Titan's fist struck the cathedral like lightning, and the preacher vanished. But the people remembered, for a heartbeat, as he stood there. They believed, and in the Imperium, sometimes belief is all that matters. His bones were never found. His name was never recorded, but his story lives. The traitor lord of Hecrusen, the fortress world of Hekros, the planetary governor made a decision. He believed the Titan could be bargained with. He ordered his soldiers to stand down, lowered the void shields, and commanded the hive to chant Broly's name as a hymn. When Broly came, the people obeyed. They filled the streets, chanting, their voices shaking. He did not care. The governor was torn apart before the first verse ended. The hive burned, yet across the stars, other desperate rulers whispered of him. They said he had tried. They called him the betrayer, but in hushed tones, some called him brave, for he had dared to do what no other dared, treat the Titan not as an enemy, but as a god. And though he failed, his story remains a stain. The Guardsman of the Emerald Walder is a tale among the Astra Militarum of the 908th Harakon drop troops. They were deployed to a hive world crumbling under Broly's fury. The Titans stood before the last spire, and they did not run, they dug in. They raised barricades of steel and stone. They painted them green, not to honor him, but to spit in his face. For 3 hours, they fought. Bolter, lasgun, grenade, 3 hours of screaming and fire. The barricades fell. The Titan walked through them. The Harakon were obliterated. But their story spread. They became a legend called the Emerald Wall, a wall that stood, however briefly, against the storm. It did not matter that they lost. In the Imperium, resistance is victory enough. The Saint of the Silent Choiron, the shrine world of Krathus, an entire choir of astropaths went blind when Broly drew near. Their leader, a woman called Soraya, did not weep. She told her followers that silence would save them, that if they prayed without sound, without word, perhaps the Titan would not see them. And so the hive fell into silence. Entire families communicated only with signs and glances. The world became a tomb of whispers. It lasted 10 years. When the Titan finally arrived, the silence broke in screams. Soraya was torn apart before her flock, but in death, she became a saint of the silent choir. Pilgrims still visit Krathus, walking barefoot in silence through ruined streets. They believe that in silence, one can endure anything. The Child of Ashism stories are too strange to be ignored. On a burned-out Agri world, after the Titan left, scavengers found a child. She was covered in ash, her hair burned away, her eyes glowing faint green. She did not speak. She only laughed, over and over, even as she starved. The ecclesiarchy claimed she was tainted. They burned her alive, but whispers say she did not burn, that she walked into the fire and vanished, that somewhere, out in the void, there is a child who laughs when worlds fall, a shadow, an echo of the Titan's passing. Why these stories matter, none of them change the truth. The Titan cannot be stopped. He cannot be bargained with. He cannot be killed. But in telling these stories, we remember. We make meaning, even when meaning is ash. We tell ourselves there were martyrs, saints, traitors, fools, because without stories, all that is left is the silence of the grave. And in the grim dark future of the 41st millennium, silence is the only true enemy. Asterisk, the galaxy is not kind. It does not care for your prayers. It does not care for your faith. It does not care for your resistance. For 10,000 years, the Imperium has told its people the same story, that the Emperor protects, that sacrifice matters, that loyalty is rewarded, that rebellion is punished, that meaning can be found in obedience. But the Green Titan broke that story. What he means to the Imperium, to the priests, he was heresy, made flesh. To the Guard, he was futility, embodied. To the Astartes, he was proof that even demigods can be made irrelevant. And yet, his presence revealed something the Imperium dares never speak, that the Emperor does not always protect, that there are storms which cannot be prayed away, that sometimes humanity is truly alone in the dark. What he means to chaos, he was worse. The ruinous powers thrive on possession, on corruption, on ownership of mortal souls. But Broly was not theirs. His rage was his own. His power was his own. His destruction was his own. And in that, he mocked them. He reminded demons and gods alike that not everything bends. Not everything feeds. Not everything belongs. For a universe built on manipulation, that truth was unbearable. What he means to humanity for us, he was terror. He was the whisper in every prayer. What if this time, the Emperor does not hear? He was the proof that no fortress is safe, no shrine is strong enough, no weapon sharp enough, and yet, in a cruel way, He gave us something the Imperium itself could not. He gave us honesty. He did not lie. He did not promise salvation. He did not tell us obedience mattered. He simply destroyed. And in that destruction, there was a clarity the Imperium has never allowed, that we endure not because we are chosen, not because we are protected, but because we have no other choice. The philosophy of ruin. So, what lesson remains, in the end? That all things break, that gods and men alike fall, that rage is a fire that consumes everything, even itself. But perhaps, the darkest truth is this: the Green Titan was not a punishment, not a judgment, not even a mistake. He was simply a storm, and you do not ask why the storm comes. You endure until it passes, or you do not endure at all. The final words. And so, when his shadow falls upon your world, when the air tastes of ozone and the ground trembles beneath his approach, do not pray for deliverance. Do not beg for mercy. Do not curse the Emperor, nor chaos, nor fate, because in that moment, you will know the truth the galaxy has always hidden from you, that there are no heroes, that there is no salvation, that the universe is not cruel, nor kind. It is simply vast, and in that vastness, you are very small. The Green Titan is not your enemy. He is not your god. He is not your judge. He is your ending. And when he comes, you will understand the only truth that matters in the 41st millennium. We endure until we cannot.